Rahul, what is really devious and sinister is that there is no arrest. That is the crucial part. The bookie was thrown out of the ground, but in England this is legal. You know, that for me is the most dangerous part, that this is legal. Companies, if you just read a number of articles that have come out recently, you know, English companies which indulge in legal gambling have been using court siding from 2005 to make millions for their clients. And they are saying that this has been in practice for the last 9 years. This is legal. How can you ban it? So effectively, despite the ECB catching the person who was doing it, throwing him out of the ground, they can't make an arrest. So the fact is, it is going on right under our nose. We know about it, but we can't do anything about it. That for me is the most sinister point. You ask me, when did it start? 2005 is when this really started, gathered momentum over the years. British companies have been using it as a regular practice. Came into focus earlier this year in Australian Open in tennis, when a man was actually arrested. And thereafter, it became sort of very, very common that how do we stop this? That's when the British law came into focus, that this is still considered legal in the UK. I don't know how you can stop it. Perhaps the only answer is, on your ticket, you put it there that no laptops, no mobile phones in a particular manner can be used. That's how you stop it. But even then, that's not a good step or to stop this. So
is there any estimate at all, Boria, about how big this racket really is? Because this essentially gives whoever sitting and watching the match in UK a huge advantage, and he can use this to make millions. You're saying it's legal in the United Kingdom and therefore nothing can be done about it. But what does, say, the Anti-Corruption Bureau, also the BCCI, the ICC, what do they intend to do about this? Are they just going to let it be and pretend that there's no problem?
No, they will have to. I mean, you know, the anti-corruption unit, the ECB will now put 2 extra anti-corruption officials for the next 3 games. But how do you eradicate this evil? How do you combat this evil? There's a serious problem, Rahul. You are absolutely right when you say that in the UK this is legal. I mean, as I said, legal. But how do you combat this? You know, I'll tell you an experience. I was in the press box, and I was actually inside the press box when the match was going on outside. Suddenly I could hear a roar, and a wicket had fallen. So even in the press box, there is a 7-8 second delay from what I'm seeing on, you know, right there in the ground. This is a really ingenious way of making money that the bookies have invented. How does the ICC combat this, the BCCI or the ECB combat this? We really don't know.
Yeah, this is truly sinister, very devious, and you can't just sit back and allow these bookies to go ahead and make their millions. Some way needs to be found, and what's particularly disturbing is that it's perfectly legal in the United Kingdom. So this bookie gets busted, and he got busted because he was being very suspicious inside a ground, and people were wondering what he's up to. They discovered that he was betting, but he then manages to get away. That is a big problem which needs to be resolved. Boria Majumdar, for joining us on the top of center stage tonight. Thank you very much. Let's move on to another story. We've got breaking news coming in that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has broken his silence on the cancellation of talks with Pakistan. Speaking to Japanese media, Narendra Modi said India was deeply disappointed because Pakistan wanted to make a spectacle by meeting separatist leaders. This is the first time that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has himself spoken of his decision to call off talks with the Hurriyat. And on this, I want to go across live to Tokyo. It's really late in the night over there, and joining us is my colleague Gaurav Sawant. Gaurav, this is the first time we are hearing from the Prime Minister speaking of his decision to break talks with Hurriyat. Does this essentially suggest that any possibility of the Prime Minister meeting with Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in Washington is now completely out of the question, given the tough line the Prime Minister himself has taken?
You're spot on there, Rahul. Sources in Prime Minister's office and in the Ministry of External Affairs had already told us the possibility of the 2 Prime Ministers meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly were almost negligible. There was no way the 2 would have met, given the fact that Prime Minister was extremely upset with Abdul Basit going ahead and meeting with Hurriyat, especially after Foreign Secretary Sujata Singh told Abdul Basit, Pakistan's High Commissioner to India, not to do so. Now, a new template had been put in place, and this was at the Prime Minister's insistence himself. The new template was that Pakistan will now deal with the Prime Minister of India and the two heads of government would stay in touch. Hurriyat had no role to play. Whatever happened in the UPA regime, in the Manmohan Singh regime, or in Atal Bihari Vajpayee or any other previous regime would no longer continue, and that was the new template. But Pakistan went back on that despite India's opposition, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi is very clear on this. We want to talk to Pakistan, but only if Pakistan talks only to us and not to the Hurriyat, Rahul.
Okay, I want to bring in also diplomat Rajiv Dogra. Given the tough position that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken, Mr. Dogra, what does this mean for the possible resumption of Indo-Pak talks? He's taken a very tough line. He says there can be no talks and terror happening at the same time. He's asking Pakistan to call off violence and all forms of terror. Now that is very difficult for Pakistan to achieve. Is it then to be assumed that India-Pakistan talks in the foreseeable future are now completely off the table, sir?
Well, I think we should look at Prime Minister's statement in two ways. Firstly, it's very carefully worded. He has also said that India will continue to make its efforts to have friendly relations with Pakistan. Now, that was a message as much to Pakistan as to some of the domestic critics, particularly the National Conference, which passed an amazing resolution yesterday in the J&K Assembly. So, one, that India is not lacking and will not lack in its efforts. But at the same time, he has drawn a red line also for Pakistan as also for domestic critics, some of the domestic critics, that you cannot have talks in an atmosphere of violence and terror, which has been his theme song right from the beginning, even before he became the Prime Minister. And I see nothing wrong with that. In fact, the J&K Assembly on its own should have passed a resolution which condemned terror which was taking place in Kiran sector and Pulwama. Instead of that, they passed a resolution in which they had no locus standi on foreign affairs, which is clearly a union subject.
Okay.
So I think Prime Minister has given a message to J&K Assembly as also to Pakistan.
With me, Ambassador Dogra, because the big focus at this time is on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Japan. It's being said that India is now forging a new friendship and Japan could be India's new best friend. Boosting trade and containing China are on the top of Prime Minister Modi's mind as he leaves for his 5-day Japan visit. Modi seeks to capitalize on his personal chemistry with his counterpart Shinzo Abe, and that may well be the deal clincher, taking Indo-Japanese ties to a completely higher plane. Remember, Modi was only the third person whom Abe followed on Twitter. The first two were his wife and a Japanese politician. Gaurav Sawant files this story for Headlines Today from Tokyo.
For his first major bilateral visit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is looking east. The first 5-day visit to Japan is being touted as a historic one. Prime Minister Modi will first meet host Prime Minister Shinzo Abe privately in the historic city of Kyoto before officially holding talks in Tokyo. And boosting trade between the two countries is on top of the agenda. Modi and his counterpart can reach an agreement to double Japanese FDI in India over the next 5 years. Modi will try to convince Japan to set up manufacturing units here to fulfill his dream of India being a manufacturing hub. One of the highlights will be the talks of buying the US-2 Shinmeiwa amphibious planes for the Indian Navy. Another big highlight of the Modi trip could be an agreement on bullet trains.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 5-day visit to Japan has been described as extremely significant from social, economic and strategic points of view. India hopes to gain from Japan's experience and build smart cities like this and Kyoto, maintain the rich cultural heritage and yet be modern 21st century cities. That's not all. India hopes Japan will invest in India, have bullet trains, and of course, India also hopes, both Japan and India hope to counter China's growing military might in this region.
The Prime Minister is traveling with a power-packed delegation of businessmen and industrialists. Big names like Mukesh Ambani, Gautam Adani, Azim Premji, Chanda Kochar and Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw are part of the PM's delegation. Narendra Modi has been building up to his Japan visit on Twitter. He tweeted in Japanese earlier this week, to which Shinzo Abe quickly responded saying he was keenly looking forward to welcoming the Indian Prime Minister.
There is a special Japanese tea ceremony in the honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and in the Japanese culture, we are told it is extremely significant. In India, it is being described as Chai Pe Charcha between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Overall, an extremely significant visit. Also strategically, can India and Japan cobble an alliance to take on the growing might of China in this region, a counterbalance to China's growing muscle display in this entire region? Will India and Japan be the pivot for other Asian countries? With cameraman Kirpal Singh, Gaurav Sawant in Tokyo for Headlines Today.
Trying to come together to take on a rising China. But I want to go across to Rajiv Dokra on how Beijing is likely to respond to this. We are seeing very senior leaders from China come to India in the next few weeks. You've got Prime Minister Narendra Modi forming a new bond with Japan with an eye on China. In the midst of all of this, where does that leave the India-China border dispute, and what will China make of this? Because I'm seeing over here a comment in the Chinese state media, the Communist State Daily, which says India should come close to Japan only at its own peril. They are being very, very cagey and very suspicious of the growing bonhomie between Delhi and Tokyo, sir.
Well, I think you're spot on. Chinese are wary. Chinese do not want this relationship to go beyond a business relationship into a deep strategic or defense relationship. So they are sending calculated messages, and I think we will do well to take notice of these messages, because overhyping a situation beyond the realm of possibility, and I choose my words very carefully because India and Japan have had differences in the past. Their national interests are different, and they will continue to be different. Just now, there is a feeling, there is a hype that maybe China brings us together much more than was anticipated, let's say, a year back or 6 months back. But defense relationship and strategic relationship cannot be built overnight, and it cannot be built because of a single point threat. Which may differ in perception from the Japanese eyes to the Indian eyes. So I think we need to tread very cautiously and very carefully, and the fact is that the elephant staring across the borders for us is China, and if at all China feels threatened, it feels threatened immediately by India. The Japanese threat is different, but Japanese relationship with China is far more deep-rooted in the economic sense and in many other ways. So India has to guard its own borders, as you said very rightly, and India has to cover its flanks.
Gaurav, what's the sense that you're picking up in Tokyo as India and China come together, as India and Japan come together? Clearly, China will be perturbed. We're already seeing the United States suggest that there be a trilateral. Washington, Delhi and Tokyo come together. There's been joint naval exercises taking place. Beijing is not going to like this, and while Japan is still very far off and fits into our larger geostrategic requirements, we've got the entire China border all across our northern frontier. So how are we going to be able to deal with China not liking the growing relationship between India and Tokyo?
Rahul, it is a tightrope walk, and relationship with Japan is not at the cost of China. The next big visit is the Chinese president visiting India next week in September. So that will be a big visit as far as India is concerned. It's a tightrope walk for Prime Minister Modi and his government, while India does want very, very close ties, economic, social, religious, cultural and strategic ties with Japan. At the same time, India also wants peaceful bilateral ties with China. The boundary issue is one issue that is being tackled separately. India is hoping to get China to invest more in India to move forward on the economic front, and for that the borders have to be silent, the borders have to be peaceful, there has to be a level of trust. So it is a tightrope walk, the effort is on.
Okay, I'm going to leave it over there. Gaurav Sawant and Rajiv Dogra for joining us on our broadcast tonight. Thank you very much. From Kyoto to Kashi, that's the bridge that is being built, an attempt being made to try and use also Japanese best technologies. Kyoto too, a temple town. Modi attempting to see how they've turned it into a smart city and try and replicate some of those best practices in India. This, of course, is a big, much anticipated visit. Gaurav Sawant will be live all through this weekend on Headlines Today.